This is not vanity. And you're not obsessed with yourself. That label is too simple and it misses what's really happening. Open your phone, open Instagram, Facebook, or Snapchat. Scroll for just 5 seconds. What do you see? Faces, hundreds of them, the same angles, the same filters, the same carefully constructed smiles staring back at you. We call this the golden age of the selfie, and statistically it is. As early as 2014, Google reported that Android users alone were taking over 90 million selfies every single day. Today, that number isn't in the millions, it's likely in the billions. For most people, posting a photo is harmless. A moment, a memory, a haircut, a vacation. But then there's a different pattern. We all know that one person, or if we're honest, that person might be us, who posts a selfie every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, happy or exhausted, celebrating or barely holding it together. No matter what's happening, the camera always turns inward. From the outside, it's easy to dismiss. They're vain. They crave attention. They're obsessed with themselves. But psychology tells a very different story. Because when a behavior repeats daily, across moods and circumstances, it usually isn't about ego. It's about regulation. It's about reassurance. It's about answering a quiet, unspoken question. Do I still matter if I'm not seen? Today, we're going to look beneath the surface of the daily selfie into the neuroscience of the like, the misunderstood spectrum of narcissism, and the research that reveals what this habit is really protecting. This is what posting selfies every day actually says about your personality. Let's begin. At first, posting was simple, a moment worth keeping, a memory you didn't want to lose, a photo that said, "This mattered to me." But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The photo stopped being a record and started becoming a requirement. You notice it in small ways. The day feels unfinished until you've posted. A good moment doesn't fully land until it's shared. Even happiness carries a quiet pressure. Don't forget to document this. Because if it stays private, it almost feels incomplete. This isn't about attention in the shallow sense. It's about continuity. About leaving a visible trail that says, "I was here. This day happened. I happened." And when that trail is missing, something feels off. Not wrong exactly, just unsettled. As if the experience didn't fully register without an external witness. You might tell yourself you're just sharing your life. But if you're honest, there's a subtle anxiety underneath. A question that hums in the background. If I don't post today, will I slowly fade from people's minds? Documentation turns into necessity when presence alone no longer feels sufficient. When being alive isn't enough, you also need proof. And the most telling sign isn't how often you post, it's how strange it feels when you don't. That quiet discomfort is where psychology starts to whisper that this isn't just a habit anymore, it's a coping mechanism. To understand why this habit tightens its grip so quietly, we have to step inside the brain. Every time you post a selfie, something small but powerful happens. Your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical involved in motivation, pleasure, and reward. Dopamine isn't about happiness itself. It's about anticipation, the maybe of something good about to happen. When you hit post, your nervous system enters a waiting state. Who will like it? How many? Who will comment and who won't? This uncertainty is the key. Psychologists call it a variable reward schedule. It's the same mechanism used by slot machines. If rewards were predictable, the brain would lose interest. But when the outcome is uncertain, attention locks in. The mind stays alert, scanning for the next signal of approval. And this is where the contract forms without your consent. Unlike sharing a thought or a piece of work, a selfie places you at the center of the feedback. When someone likes a landscape photo, they appreciate what you saw. When they like a selfie, it feels like they're approving you. Your face, your presence, your worth. For a brief moment, the dopamine hits. There's a lift in mood, a sense of relief. You feel slightly more anchored in the social world. But dopamine is fast and fleeting. It rises and it drops. What follows is subtle, a quiet flattening. The urge to check again, to refresh, to see if the number moved. And when the feeling fades, the brain remembers the shortcut. Post again. Over time, the selfie becomes less about expression and more about regulation. A way to manage mood, a way to soothe uncertainty, a way to reassure yourself that you still matter. No one ever sat you down and explained this exchange. You never agreed to outsource your sense of worth to a notification system. But once the loop is in place, it doesn't ask permission. It simply waits for the next time you feel just uncertain enough to reach for the camera. The boost doesn't last. After the likes slow down, something else moves in quietly, almost politely. A dullness, a low-grade tension. Not sadness, exactly. More like a subtle drop in the body, as if the emotional floor just sank an inch without warning. You might not even notice it at first. You just check again, refresh, scroll back to your post, count the numbers, compare them to the last one, to someone else's. Your nervous system is searching for reassurance, trying to stretch the feeling a little longer. This is the part no one posts about. Because after the high comes the crash, not dramatic, not obvious, but persistent. Dopamine always leaves a gap behind, and the brain, wired for balance, doesn't like gaps. It wants relief. It wants restoration, fast. So the mind starts offering solutions. Maybe a better angle next time. Maybe post again later. Maybe today just wasn't the right time. What's really happening is emotional dependency, forming in silence. The selfie didn't fail, it worked. It just worked temporarily, and now the system wants another dose. Over time, this cycle trains your body to associate stillness with discomfort. Not posting begins to feel restless, unresolved, like something important was forgotten. And that's the quiet danger. Not that you enjoy the attention, but that your nervous system starts to rely on it to feel okay. This is usually the moment where the word narcissism enters the conversation. And just as quickly, the walls go up. We picture arrogance, vanity, someone in love with their own reflection. But psychology tells a far more complicated and far more human story. Research does show a connection between frequent selfie posting and narcissistic traits. But narcissism isn't a single thing. It exists on a spectrum. And where someone falls on that spectrum changes everything about why they post. On one end is grandiose narcissism. This is the version most people recognize. Confidence that spills over into entitlement. A genuine belief in one's superiority. For these individuals, a selfie is a display, a trophy, the world is a stage, and the audience is expected to applaud. But many daily selfie posters don't live there. They fall on the other end of the spectrum, what psychologists call vulnerable narcissism. And this is where the story shifts. Vulnerable narcissism isn't driven by excess self-love. It's driven by fragile self-worth, by hypersensitivity, by an internal sense of being easily replaced, easily overlooked. For these individuals, the selfie isn't a statement, it's a question. Do you still see me? Am I still relevant? Have I faded from your awareness? The need isn't admiration, it's reassurance. Their sense of self depends heavily on external feedback because internal stability was never fully built. When validation comes, there's relief. When it doesn't, there's a quiet panic. Seen through this lens, The daily selfie stops looking like ego and starts looking like protection, a way to guard against invisibility, a way to hold a place in a world that moves fast and forgets quickly. It isn't about loving yourself too much. It's about being terrified of what happens when no one is looking. Patterns like this don't appear out of nowhere. No one wakes up one day and decides to need constant visibility. They are learned slowly, quietly, long before there was a front-facing camera to confirm anything. For many people, the roots trace back to environments where attention was inconsistent or conditional, where being noticed wasn't guaranteed, and emotional presence depended on performance, mood, or timing. Love wasn't absent, but it wasn't stable either. You learned early on that visibility mattered. Maybe you were praised when you looked a certain way, when you behaved well, when you made adults proud, and overlooked when you were quiet, sad, or simply ordinary. Over time, a simple equation formed in the nervous system. Being seen equals being safe. This is how external validation becomes survival wiring. When emotional attunement is missing in childhood, when no one reliably mirrors your inner world, you learn to mirror yourself. You watch how others respond to you and build your identity from that feedback. Approval becomes the compass. Silence becomes threat. Social media didn't create this need. It just gave it a perfectly efficient outlet. The daily selfie is a modern solution to an old uncertainty. Am I still held in mind when I'm not right in front of you? For some, this pattern also grows from emotional unpredictability. Caregivers who were loving one moment and withdrawn the next. Attention that could be withdrawn without explanation. In those environments, staying visible feels protective. If you can be seen, maybe you won't be forgotten. So the habit isn't shallow, it's adaptive. It helped you stay connected in a system that felt unreliable. The tragedy is that what once protected you no longer fits the world you're in now. Because adulthood asks for something different. It asks for a self that can exist without constant confirmation, a sense of worth that doesn't flicker when attention shifts. Understanding where this pattern comes from isn't about blame, it's about compassion. When you see the origin clearly, the behavior stops looking like a flaw and starts looking like a strategy that outlived its purpose. And only then does real change become possible. When visibility becomes central to safety, something subtle begins to change in how you experience life. You stop living it from the inside. Psychologists call this the imaginary audience, the sense that you are constantly being observed, evaluated, and remembered. In adolescence, this is normal. The brain is still forming its sense of identity, but social media has extended this stage far beyond its natural endpoint. You begin to see yourself the way others might see you, not just in photos, but in moments. You don't simply sit in a cafe, you notice how you look sitting there. You don't just laugh, you register how it might appear. Even solitude carries an imagined witness. This is self-objectification, and it's exhausting. When your attention is split between experiencing and monitoring, presence erodes. A part of your mind is always running in the background, scanning for angles, lighting, and potential moments of capture. Life becomes a performance with no intermission. Over time, the body feels it. Chronic self-monitoring consumes cognitive and emotional energy. Joy flattens, spontaneity tightens. You're present, but never fully at rest. The most damaging part isn't how others see you, it's how you begin to see yourself as an object to be evaluated, rather than a subject who feels. Worth becomes visual, existence becomes conditional. And the cruel irony is this: the more you try to secure connection by being visible, the further you drift from your own internal experience. You are seen everywhere, yet less and less inhabited. Living under an imaginary audience doesn't make you shallow. It means you learn that attention once mattered more than presence. When you live under constant observation, a second version of you begins to form, not in your body but on the screen. Filters smooth what life leaves uneven. Angles erase what mirrors reveal. Over time, your digital twin becomes more familiar than your real face, more controlled, more predictable, more rewarded. At first, it feels harmless, even empowering, but slowly a comparison takes root. You notice it when you open the camera and feel a flicker of disappointment before the filter loads, when the unedited reflection feels like a draft and the online version feels like the final copy. A subtle resentment builds, not toward the app, but toward yourself. This is where the gap becomes dangerous. Psychologists have begun to call this phenomenon Snapchat dysmorphia, a growing discomfort with one's real appearance after prolonged exposure to altered digital images. The issue isn't vanity, it's identity, confusion. Which version of you feels more real? Which one receives love? The more you post the curated self, the harder it becomes to accept the unfiltered one. The camera stops being a tool and becomes a shield, a way to maintain an illusion not just for others, but for yourself. And the quiet cost is this: the more you protect the digital twin, the more distant you feel from your own face. On the surface, it doesn't make sense. Someone who posts every day should feel connected, surrounded, engaged. Their face is everywhere. Their presence is constant. And yet, beneath that visibility, there is often a quiet, persistent loneliness. Because being seen is not the same as being known. Likes are fast, effortless. They ask nothing of the person giving them. A double tap requires no curiosity, no emotional risk, no real attention. It's acknowledgement without intimacy. When connection is built this way, something important is missing. No one is sitting with your uncertainty. No one is hearing the parts of you that don't photograph well. The interaction ends at the surface. So the paradox deepens. The more visible you become, the less room there is for real closeness. People respond to the image, not the inner world behind it. And over time, you may notice that while many recognize you, very few truly understand you. This is why high engagement can coexist with deep isolation. The nervous system is still waiting for something slower, something mutual, something that says, "I see you beyond what you show." Hundreds of likes can never replace one moment of being emotionally met. And until that kind of connection is present, visibility will always feel incomplete, no matter how constant it becomes. Healing doesn't begin by deleting your accounts. It doesn't require disappearing, going silent, or rejecting the world that taught you to stay visible. It begins with a quieter shift, learning to exist without being witnessed, sitting in a moment that no one will see, record, or approve, and letting it still be enough. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, because when visibility has long been tied to safety, privacy can feel like risk. But slowly, something changes. You start to notice your internal signals again, how your body feels when no one is watching, what you enjoy when there's no performance attached. Worth begins to move inward, away from numbers and reactions, and back into lived experience. This doesn't mean you stop sharing. It means sharing becomes a choice instead of a requirement, expression instead of regulation, presence instead of proof. You don't vanish when the camera turns off. You return to yourself. And if any part of this video felt uncomfortably familiar, you're not broken, you adapted, you learned how to stay connected in the safest way available at the time. Now, you're simply learning a new way, one that doesn't ask you to earn your place by being seen. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt pressure to stay visible, just to feel relevant? Leave a comment below. I read every single one.